Chapter 8 of Cocoa and Chocolate. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Allison Hester of Athens, Georgia. Cocoa and Chocolate, From Plantation to Consumer, by Arthur W. Knapp. Chapter 8. The Composition and Food Value of Cocoa and Chocolate. The early writers on chocolate generally became lyrical when they wrote of its value as a food. Thus, in the Natural History of Chocolate by R. Brooks, 1730, we read that an ounce of chocolate contains as much nourishment as a pound of beef; that a woman and a child, or even a counsellor, lived on chocolate alone for a long period; and further, before chocolate was known in Europe, good old wine was called the milk of old men, but this title is now applied with greater reason to chocolate, since its use has become so common that it has been perceived that chocolate is, with respect to them, what milk is to infants. A more temperate zone is shown in the following, from a curious treatise of the nature and quality of chocolate by Antonio Colmenero de Ledesma, a Spaniard, physician and chirurgeon of the city of Ecija in Andalusia, printed at the Green Dragon, 1685. So great is the number of those persons who at present do drink of chocolate, that not only in the West Indies, whence this drink has its original beginning, but also in Spain, Italy, Flanders, etc., it is very much used, and especially in the court of the King of Spain, where the great ladies drink it in a morning before they rise out of their beds, and lately much used in England as diet and physic with the gentry. Yet there are several persons that stand in doubt both of the hurt and of the benefit which proceeds from the use thereof; some saying that it obstructs and causes oppilations; others, and those the most part, that it fattens; several assures us that it fortifies the stomach; some again that it heats and inflames the body; but very many steadfastly affirm that though they should drink it at all hours, that even in the dog days they find themselves very well after it." So much for the old valuations. Let us now attempt by modern methods to estimate the food value of cacao and its preparations. Food value of cacao beans. In estimating the worth of a food, it is usual to compare the fuel values. This peculiar method is adopted because the most important requirement in nutrition is that of giving energy for the work of the body, and a food may be thought of as being burnt up, oxidized, in the human machine in the production of heat and energy. The various food constituents serve in varying degrees as fuel to produce energy, and hence, to judge of the food value, it is necessary to know the chemical composition. Below we give the average composition of cacao beans, and the fuel value calculated from these figures. Average composition and fuel value of freshly roasted cacao beans, nibs. Cacao butter. Composition 54.0 equals energy giving power 2,282 calories per pound. Protein, total nitrogen 2.3%. Composition 11.9 equals energy giving power 221 calories per pound. Cacao starch. Composition 6.7 energy giving power 472 calories per pound. Other digestible carbohydrates, etc. Composition 18.7 equals energy giving power 472 calories per pound. Stimulants. Theobromine, composition 1.0. Caffeine, composition 0.4. Mineral matter, composition 3.2. Crude fiber, composition 2.6. Moisture, composition 1.5. Total composition 100. Total energy giving power 2,975 calories per pound. It will be seen from the above analysis that the cacao bean is rich in fats, carbohydrates, and protein, and that it contains small quantities of the two stimulants, theobromine and caffeine. In the whole range of animal and vegetable foodstuffs, there are only one or two which exceed it in energy-giving power. If expressed in quite another way, namely as food units, the value of the cacao bean stands equally high, as is shown by the following figures taken from Smitham's result published in the Journal of the Royal Agricultural Society, 1914. Food units: turnips 8, carrots 12, potatoes 26, rice 102, corn flour 104, wheat 106, peas 113, oatmeal 117, coconut 159, cacao bean 183. These figures indicate the high food value of the raw material. We will now proceed to consider the various products which are obtained from it. Food value of cocoa. Average composition and fuel value of untreated cocoa. Cacao butter, composition 28.0 equals energy giving power 1,183 calories per pound. Protein, composition 18.3 equals energy giving power 340 calories per pound. Cacao starch, composition 10.2, energy giving power 718 calories per pound. Other digestible carbohydrates, etc., composition 28.4 equals energy giving power 718 calories per pound. Stimulants: theobromine, composition 1.5, caffeine, composition 0.6, mineral matter, composition 5.0, crude fiber, composition 4.0, moisture composition 4.0, total composition 100.0, total energy giving power 2,241 calories per pound. Soluble cocoa, i.e. cocoa which has been treated with alkaline salts, is almost identical in composition, save that the mineral matter is about 7.5%. As cocoa consists of the cacao bean, with some of the butter extracted, a process which increases the percentage of the nitrogenous and carbohydrate constituents, it will be evident that the food value of cocoa powder is high, and that it is a concentrated foodstuff. In this respect, it differs from tea and coffee, which have practically no food value. Each of them, however, have special qualities of their own. Some of the claims made for these beverages are a little remarkable. The Embassy of the United Provinces, in their address to the Emperor of China, Leyden, 1655, in mentioning the good properties of tea, wrote, "More especially it disintoxicates those that are fuddled, giving them new forces, and enabling them to go to it again." The Embassy do not state whether they speak from personal experience, but their admiration for tea is undoubted. Tea, coffee, and cocoa are amongst our blessings. Each has its devotees, each has its peculiar delight. Tea makes for cheerfulness, coffee makes for wit and wakefulness, and cocoa relieves the fatigued, and giving a comfortable feeling of satisfaction and stability. Of these three drinks, cocoa alone can be considered as a food, and just as there are people whose digestion is deranged by tea, and some who sleep not a wink after drinking coffee, so there are some who find cocoa too feeding, especially in the summer time. These sufferers from biliousness will think it curious that cocoa is habitually drunk in many hot climates. Thus, in Spanish-speaking countries, it is the custom for the priest, after saying Mass, to take a cup of chocolate. The pure cocoa powder is, as we saw above, a very rich foodstuff, but it must always be remembered that in a pint of cocoa only a small quantity, about half an ounce, is usually taken. In this connection the following comparison between tea, coffee, and cocoa is not without interest. It is taken from the Farmer's Bulletin 249, an official publication of the United States Department of Agriculture. Comparison of energy-giving power of a pint of tea, coffee, and cocoa. Tea, 0.5 ounce to 1 pint water. 99.5% water, 0.2% protein, 0% fat, 0.6% carbohydrates, fuel value per pound 15 calories. Coffee, 1 ounce to 1 pint water. 98.9% water, 0.2% protein, 0% fat, 0.7 carbohydrates, fuel value per pound 16 calories. Cocoa, 0.5 ounces to 1 pint water, 97.1% water, 0.6% protein, 0.9% fat, 1.1% carbohydrates, fuel value per pound 65 calories. These figures place cocoa, as a food, head and shoulders above tea and coffee. The figures are for the beverages made without the addition of milk and sugar, both of which are almost invariably present. A pint of cocoa made with 1/3 milk, half an ounce of cocoa, and 1 ounce of sugar would have a fuel value of 320 calories, and is therefore equivalent in energy-giving power to 1/4 pound of beef, or 4 eggs. Cocoa is stimulating, but its action is not so marked as that of tea or coffee, and hence it is more suitable for young children. Dr. Hutchison, an authority on dietetics, writes, "Tea and coffee are also harmful to the susceptible nervous system of the child, but cocoa, made with plenty of milk, may be allowed, though it should be regarded, like milk, as a food rather than a beverage properly so called." How to make a cup of cocoa. Tea, coffee, and cocoa are all so easy to make that it is remarkable anyone should fail to prepare them perfectly. Whilst in France everyone can prepare coffee to perfection, and many fail in making a cup of tea. In England all are adepts in the art of tea making, and many do not distinguish themselves in the preparation of coffee. Cocoa in either country is not always the delightful beverage it should be. The directions below, if carefully followed, will be found to give the character of cocoa its full expression. The principal conditions to observe are to avoid iron saucepans, to use boiling water or milk, to froth the cocoa before serving, and to serve steaming hot in thick cups. The amount of cocoa required for 2 large breakfast cups, that is 1 pint, is as much as will go, when piled up, in a dessert spoon. Take then a heaped dessert spoonful of pure cocoa and mix dry with 1 1/2 times its bulk of fine sugar. Set this on one side whilst the boiling liquid is prepared. Mix 1 breakfast cup of water with 1 breakfast cup of milk, and raise to the boil in an enamelled saucepan. Whilst this is proceeding, warm the jug which is to hold the cocoa, and transfer the dry sugar cocoa mixture to it. Now pour in the boiling milk and water. Transfer back to saucepan and boil for 1 minute. Whisk vigorously for 1/4 minute. Serve without delay. Digestibility of cocoa. We have noted above the high percentage of nutrients which cocoa contains, and the research conducted by J. Forster shows that these nutrients are easily assimilated. Forster found that the fatty and mineral constituents of cocoa are both completely digested, and the nitrogenous constituents are digested in the same proportion as in finest bread, and more completely than in bread of average quality. One very striking fact was revealed by his researches, namely, that the consumption of cocoa increases the digestive power for other foods which are taken at the same time, and that this increase is particularly evident with milk. Dr. R.O. Newman, who fed himself with cocoa preparations for over 12 weeks, whilst not agreeing with this conclusion, states that the consumption of cocoa, from the point of view of health, leaves nothing to be desired. The taking of large or small quantities of cocoa, either rich or poor in fat, with or without other food, gave rise to no digestive troubles during the 86 days which formed the duration of the experiments. He considers that cocoas containing a high percentage of cacao butter are preferable to those which contain low percentages, and that a 30% butter content meets all requirements. It is worthy of note that 28 to 30% is the quantity of butter found in ordinary high-class cocoas. As experts are liable to disagree, and it is almost possible to prove anything by a judicious selection from their writings, it may be well to give an extract from some modern text-book as more nearly expressing the standard opinion of the times. In Second Stage Hygiene, by Mr. Eichen and Dr. Leister, a textbook written for the Board of Education syllabus, we read, page 96, "In the better cocoas the greater part of the fat is removed by heat and pressure. In this form cocoa may be looked upon as almost an ideal food, as it contains proteids, fats, and carbohydrates in roughly the right proportions. Prepared with milk and sugar, it forms a highly nutritious and valuable stimulating beverage." Stimulating property of cocoa. The mild stimulating property which cocoa possesses is due to the presence of the two substances theobromine and caffeine. The presence of theobromine is peculiar to cocoa, but caffeine is a stimulating principle which also occurs in tea and coffee. Whilst in the quantities in which they are present in cocoa, about 1.5% of theobromine and 0.6% of caffeine, they act only as agreeable stimulants. In the pure condition, as white crystalline powders, they are powerful curative agents. Caffeine is well known as a specific for nervous headaches, and as a heart stimulant and diuretic. Theobromine is similar in action, but has the advantage for certain cases that it has much less effect on the central nervous system, and for this reason it is a very valuable medicine for sufferers from heart dropsy and as a tonic for senile heart. That its medicinal properties are appreciated is shown by its price. During 1918 the retail price was about 8 shillings an ounce, from which we can calculate that every pound of cocoa contained nearly 2 shillings worth of theobromine. Soluble cocoa. Whilst Forster states that treated cocoa is the most digestible, experts are not in agreement as to which is the more valuable foodstuff, the pure untouched cocoa, or that which is treated during its manufacture with alkaline salts. The cocoa so treated is generally described as soluble, although its only claim to this name is that the mineral salts in the cocoa are rendered more soluble by the treatment. It is also sometimes incorrectly described as containing alkali, but actually no alkali is present in the cocoa, either in a free state or as carbonate. The potassium exists, "in the form of phosphates or combinations of organic acids, that is to say, in the ideal form in which these bodies occur in foods of animal and vegetable origin." Fritzsche, Fabrication du Chocolat, page 216. Food value of chocolate. I ate a little chocolate from my supply, well knowing the miraculous sustaining powers of the simple little block. From Mr. Isaacs, by F. Marion Crawford. Whilst the food value of cocoa powder is very high, the drink prepared from it can only be regarded as an accessory food, because it is usual to take the powder in small quantities, just as with beef tea it is usual to take only a small portion of an ox in a teacup. But chocolate is often eaten in considerable quantities at a time, and must therefore be regarded as an important foodstuff, and not considered, as it frequently is considered, simply a luxury. The eating of cacao mixed with sugar dates from very early days, but it is only in recent times that it has become the principal sweetmeat. What would a sweet shop be today without chocolate, that summit of the confectioner's art, when the rich brown chocolate is the predominant note in every confectioner's window? What would the lovers in England do without chocolates, which enable them to indulge their delight in giving what is sure to be well received? As a luxury it is universally appreciated, and because of this appreciation its value as a food is sometimes overlooked. During the war chocolate was valued as a compact foodstuff which is easily preserved. Dr. Gastineau Earle, lecturing for the Institute of Hygiene in 1915 on food factor in war, said, "Chocolate is a most valuable concentrated food, especially when other foods are not available. It is the chief constituent of the emergency ration." Its importance as a concentrated foodstuff was appreciated in the United States, for every comfort kit made up for the American soldiers fighting in the war contained a cake of sweet chocolate. There are a number of records of people whose lives have been preserved by means of chocolate. One of the most recent was the case of Commander Stewart, who was torpedoed in H.M.S. Cornwallis in the Mediterranean in 1917. He happened to have in his cabin one of the boxes of chocolate presented to the Army and Navy in 1915 by the colonies of Trinidad, Grenada, and St. Lucia, who gave the cacao and paid English manufacturers to make it into chocolate. He had been treasuring the box as a souvenir, but being the only article of food available, he filled his pockets with the chocolate, which sustained him through many trying hours. We have already seen the high food value of the cacao bean. What of the sugar which chocolate contains? Sugar is consumed in large quantities in England, the consumption per head amounting to 80 to 90 pounds per year. It is well known as a giver of heat and energy, and Sir Ernest Shackleton reports that it proved a great life preserver and sustainer in Arctic regions. Our practical acquaintance with sugar commences at birth, milk containing about 5% of milk and sugar, and when one considers the amazing activity of young children, one understands their continuous demand for sugar. Dr. Hutchinson, in his well-known Food and the Principles of Dietetics, says, "The craving for sweets which children show is, no doubt, the natural expression of a physiological need, but they should be taken with, and not between meals. Chocolate is one of the most wholesome and nutritious forms of such sweets." Both the constituents of chocolate being nourishing, it follows that chocolate itself has a high food value. This is proved by the figures given below. As with cocoa, we have first to know the composition before we can calculate the food value. The relative proportions of nib, butter, and sugar vary considerably in ordinary chocolate, so that it is difficult to give an average composition. There are sticks of eating chocolate which contain as little as 24% of cacao butter, whilst chocolate used for covering contains about 36% of butter. As modern high-class eating chocolate contains about 31% of butter, we will take this for purposes of calculation. Average composition and fuel value of English eating chocolate. Cacao butter. Composition 31.4 equals energy giving power 1,327 calories per pound. Protein. Total nitrogen 78%. Composition 4.1 equals energy giving power 76 calories per pound. Cacao starch. Composition 2.3. Other digestible carbohydrates, etc. Composition 6.4. Together equal energy giving power 162 calories per pound. Stimulants. Theobromine. Composition 0.3. Caffeine. Composition 0.1. Mineral matter. Composition 1.2. Crude fiber. Composition 0.9. Moisture composition 1.0. Sugar composition 52.3 equals energy giving power 973 calories per pound. Total composition 100.0, Total energy-giving power, 2,538 calories per pound. In Snyder's Human Foods, 1916, the official analysis of 163 common foods are given. They include practically everything that human beings eat, and only 3 are greater than chocolate in energy-giving power. The result, 2,538 calories per pound, which we obtain by calculation, is lower than the figure 2,768 calories per pound for chocolate given by Sherman in his book on Food and Nutrition, 1918. Probably his figure is for unsweetened chocolate. The table below shows the energy-giving value of cocoa and chocolate compared with well-known foodstuffs. The figures, save for eating chocolate, are taken from Sherman's book and are calculated from the analysis given in Bulletin 28 of the United States Department of Agriculture. Food value of foodstuffs. Cabbage, 121 calories per pound. Codfish, 209 calories per pound. Apples, 214 calories per pound. Potatoes, 302 calories per pound. Milk, 314 calories per pound. Eggs, 594 calories per pound. Beef steak, 960 calories per pound. Bread, average white, 1,180 calories per pound. Oatmeal, 1,811 calories per pound. Sugar, 1,815 calories per pound. Cocoa, 2,258 calories per pound. Eating chocolate, 2,538 calories per pound. Food value of milk chocolate. The value of milk as a food is so generally recognized as to need no commendation here. When milk is evaporated to a dry solid, about 87.5% of water is driven off, so that the milk left has about 8 times the food value of the original milk. Milk chocolate of good quality contains from 15 to 25% of milk solids. Milk chocolate varies greatly in composition, but for the purpose of calculating the food value, we may assume that about a quarter of a high-class milk chocolate consists of solid milk, and this is combined with about 40% of cane sugar and 35% of cacao butter and cacao mass. Analysis and fuel value of milk chocolate. Milk fat and cacao butter, 35.0, 1,480 calories per pound. Milk and cocoa proteins, 8.0, equals 149 calories per pound. Cacao starch and digestible carbohydrates, 3.0, equals 56 calories per pound. Stimulants, theobromine and caffeine, 0.2. Mineral matter, 2.0. Crude fiber, 0.3. Moisture, 1.5. Milk sugar and cane sugar, 50.0, equals 930 calories per pound. Total, 100.0, equals 2,615 calories per pound. It will be noted that the food value of milk chocolate is even greater than that of plain chocolate. It is highly probable that milk chocolate is the most nutritious of all sweet meats. It is not generally recognized that when we purchase 1 pound of high-class milk chocolate, we obtain 3/4 of a pound of chocolate and 2 pounds of milk. End of chapter 8.